So maybe you can just help us get an understanding for what does the business do?
Okay, so Bradenbury Expediting, we go by BBE. We're a logistics company that vertically integrates different parts of the supply chain, and we typically focus our business efforts into the Arctic, but we do have a large operation in Edmonton and also in Ottawa, which are gateways to the north.
So when you say vertically integrates, I'm assuming that most of our students haven't heard that term yet or aren't familiar enough with what that means. Can you describe what that is?
Okay, so vertically integrated means taking different parts of the supply chain and building them together. So it could be trucking or warehousing or things like freight forwarding, different services, and blending them together and selling them as a package.
Who are some of your clients? Who do you work with?
Some of our clients are, we have 12 different airlines that we handle cargo for. So Canadian North Cargo, WestJet, British Airways, Air China Cargo, KLM, and many others. We have Dominion Diamonds, which is a diamond mine north of Yellowknife, is one of our key clients. We do a lot of work for Raytheon through the Department of Defense, and also, I guess, probably one of our other key customers is really the people in the north. So we do a lot of work for people who live in remote communities who don't have the ability to shop or get their hands on goods very regularly, so we'll move them for them into the north.
Do you have an example of something, like maybe a specific community that has a challenge getting something and how you've helped solve that?
Yeah, we have, so Cambridge Bay is a community in Nunavut, and it's on Victoria Island, and it's fly in, fly out, and they get a sea lift, comes once a year. That's when people buy their big products and they get a chance to get them. Otherwise, cargo just sort of flies in and it's very expensive to get what they need. So we've had actually requests for the Frozen, the Disney movie Frozen.
Oh yeah.
A little girl wanted a birthday party with a Frozen theme, and of course there's nowhere in Cambridge Bay to buy any of this, so we had to shop for it in Edmonton and get it to them. So little things like that, from birthday party themes to big cargo and mining cargo.
That's pretty specific. Like that's an individual person wanting the movie, a copy of the movie. That's
they wanted like birthday party.
All
the supplies to make a little girl. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So really from industrial stuff to people's everyday kind of needs.
The majority of your work is on the industrial side?
That's right. Yeah, I would say about an eighth of our work is personal. So we do the shopping and the shipping for people, and the rest of it is all industrial based.
Okay.
Yeah.
You shared with us some photos, and maybe we'll just go through some of them.
Sure.
And you can describe to us, if you guys can see what we're seeing here.
Okay, so this is I just mentioned the sea lift. So this is through the Northwest Passage. If you look at a map of Canada, you can see there's water that moves through. The last slide was delivering cargo into a remote mine site. This is on the Mackenzie River outside of Tuktoyaktuk for a drilling program.
Sorry, this is progressing before I thought.
Yeah. So this is an oil and gas project that was running in 2007. We managed all of the cargo on barges as warehouses because there was no warehouses. So we stationed barges and used them to dispense fuel and equipment and parts and so forth. This is an offshore drilling rig in the Beaufort Sea, again outside of Tuktoyaktuk. Our company did all of the logistics for that program when it drilled in 2005, 2006. And that was kind of an interesting project for us because we had to take all kinds of equipment that had been on board the ship for years that hadn't drilled and hadn't done anything since the 1980s. So we had to mobilize everything to Houston and all of the pipe and big equipment and get it retrofitted and shipped back north. So it was quite a good project for us. It's an example of a winter road moving cargo into the north again. It's the ice road trucking, if you will.
What is this thing here?
So that's the Antonov. So that's the largest cargo carrying aircraft in the world. That was done in Edmonton, and we put 3 helicopters into that and several sea containers and moved it to Afghanistan for a contractor for the U.S. Department of Defense when they were still at war with Afghanistan. So we
helicopters.
3 helicopters went into that. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was kind of a fun one, and so we loaded it, and then over the course of the war, if you will, we did all of the movement of the helicopters and the parts in and out of Afghanistan. So it helped our company really get an international feel. And we met the helicopter company, of course, in the north, and they thought we were really good at what we did. So we took the services and went abroad. And so we've been doing international shipping ever since then. So,
Really?
yeah.
What makes the business, like I imagine that it's a pretty complicated process. What makes your business successful? What are the kind of the key strengths to what you guys do?
I think the key strengths are the people. So we've talked a little bit about, I know Rickard and yourself, Leo, we've talked about it in the past, but really, you know, we're in the freight moving business, and I'm sure you're all thinking freight's pretty boring, and it is kind of boring, you know, it's just a box from here to here, but it's really the people that work behind it that are the personality and the service to it, and I think we're successful because of the people that we have, and I mean, we do have placements for co-op students from the supply chain part of this program. We've got 4 grads from the program that work for us in different parts of our business, and they're all excellent. They've got great, you know, we value the education that people bring to it, and it's the people, really. Yeah, service is just service. If you don't have good people, it's really, you know.
So do you have employees that are located all over the map here? Or?
Yeah, we have, so one of our, well, we've got bases in Edmonton, Ottawa, Yellowknife, Inuvik, Norman Wells, and Cambridge Bay, and then our clients are on sites that are kind of remotely scattered in between. So we do have staff on our client sites as well as in our home bases.
Okay, okay. How did you get into this? Like, how long have you been in this role as president, and how did you get into it?
Okay, so I've been in this role, this is my 5th year, and I was, kind of to make a long story short, at one time BBE was a family-owned business, so my dad owned it, and when I was a little girl I had to, you know, clean trucks and sweep the warehouse and that kind of thing, and that was in Yellowknife, and then in 2007 I was working, I finished my degree and I went to work for the Forzani Group in Calgary as a purchasing analyst, so I was sort of in the supply chain on the procurement side, and anyway, we had a project. My dad asked me to come and work for the family business, and then about 6 months later, he sold the company to an Inuit firm, and that was in 2007. And then from there, I was involved in logistics, and I was really liking what I was doing. And then one of our clients, one of the mining clients that I showed, they hired me on directly, so I worked for a gold mining company for a couple of years. And then the new owners of BBE, they were looking to replace the president. He was retiring, and so they asked if I wanted the job, and I said, oh God, I don't know anything about running a business. I can move freight really well, but you know, running a business is a totally different kettle of fish. But you know, we agreed that as part of the, you know, the cycle of the job, I would go and do my MBA, and then really just sort of incorporate what I knew about, you know, the business into helping the strategic vision and moving the business forward. So.
And don't take this the wrong way. I'm wondering if you're kind of underselling yourself here. Why would they ask you if you felt like you didn't know anything about running a business?
I think because I understood the nature of the business, and so you know, we were volume based. We need cargo to make money, and I think I did. Maybe I do understand the business, and I did at that time too. But you know, there's a lot of ladies in the room here today, so, you know, International Women's Day just passed. I don't know that that was a topic, but women tend to undersell themselves anyway, and typically, as women, we don't apply for a job until we're totally qualified for it. Otherwise, you don't feel like you can do it, right? Men generally will put their name in the hat and I'll figure it out when I get it kind of thing, but women generally aren't that sort of self-assured until we know we can do it, and the man who hired me to do this job, he's the CEO of Norterra, so our parent company. I think he just believed in me, and it was kind of an interesting fit. Yeah.
And so how was it the first kind of little while when you got into that position? Did you feel like you didn't know what you were doing, or did you feel, oh, actually, I'm handling things?
I felt like the flow of the business came very naturally, but leadership is something that I think I've always been a natural born leader to some degree. The financial side of the business scared me and still does, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
So I think it was a learning curve, and it was a big one, and it was and you know, a year into the job, I started my executive MBA with Queen's, and I was in school full time and I was working full time, so it was intense, but I think that's kind of what I needed to really get into it. So
just kind of get a sense for your history. You know, as a young child, you had exposure to this business. You said you worked with the Forzani Group, and then you went back to to the business again, but then you also got hired directly to a mining company,
Yes, yeah.
right? And then you kind of got
Then I
brought back
came
again.
Yeah, that's right.
So was it fate? I don't know if you believe in that, but was it inevitable that you were going to be leading this company, or did certain things happen that kind of really pushed you that way?
I think we're a 40-year-old business, so we'll be 40 here next year. I think some people at BBE think that it was sort of, they could see it coming, but I've never felt that way.
Yeah.
I feel like it's based on hard work and being able to, deliver on what you say you're going to deliver on. So I think some people thought, yeah, I could see that happening, and it doesn't surprise me that you are where you are today.
Yeah.
But to me, I never felt like it was ever a given in any way.
Let's talk about kind of your role as a female leader, and we don't talk about it enough in the class, but when we have a speaker that can really resonate and kind of share your insight on this, I think it's valuable to explore it. What are some of the challenges that you faced? And I'm assuming that maybe you're on the younger side
Yes.
of the
Thank
kind of
you.
the spectrum. Like, what are the challenges that you faced?
Okay, so I worked in a warehouse. I started moving freight in a cargo shed, and it's a very male-dominated industry. I'm 38 now, so when I was in my early 20s, I was, driving a forklift and loading planes, and again, working with a lot of men. And, there were challenges along the way, but I think part of moving through what I did was, I think you just have to work hard, tackle challenges as they come up. But I also think that women have to work harder than men anyway. And because when I was growing up and my dad owned the company, I had to work twice as hard as any other employee, because my dad was never going to be satisfied with, me just putting in time. So I think in terms of being a woman, I don't know how that played into it, but I just know that I'm an extremely hard worker, and that seemed to help me overcome any of the challenges that did come up in that type of situation. So,
What does your dad think about what you're doing now?
When I phoned him, I said, "Dad, you're not going to believe this. Norterra asked me if I want to talk about being the president of BB." He said, "Oh God, Heather, don't do it."
Yeah.
He said, "Really, I was working for a global mining company." He said, your opportunities with Newmont are wonderful. Stay there and do your thing. Why would you go back?" And so he didn't think that was the right path, but I took it anyway, because I think for myself. And now he's extremely proud of me.
That's great.
Yeah, it's great.
And is he retired, or is he involved at all?
No, he retired in 2007 when he sold the business. So he's 10 years, I guess, almost 10 years. So,
yeah. That's great. That's great. Kind of going back to earlier days. So when you're in, did you take an undergrad degree somewhere?
Yes, I did my undergrad at Mount Royal when it was Mount Royal College in Calgary, and I did the applied small business and entrepreneurship degree. So I had to do 2 co-ops and start a business twice. And part of the reason that I like MacEwan and the feel for your program is because of the smaller class sizes, because frankly, one of the challenges I had growing up was I was a terrible student. In school, took me 5 times before I passed my math 30.
Oh, really?
So I'm not very, math is not my thing, and I had to work really hard to get through it. And so when I went to Mount Royal, I felt like the class sizes were something that I could, dig in and really, it was easier to connect with people, I think. So, yeah.
What do you remember? What kind of businesses you started?
Yes, I do. So one was my friend and I. We decided we were going to write business plans, and we got hooked up with Mark Bloomis, the man who started Mark's Work Warehouse.
Okay.
And he's now passed away, but we wrote business plans for him for almost 2 years.
Really?
Yeah, and that was excellent because he had already developed Mark's Work Warehouse. It was across Canada, and he was no longer part of the business, so he was starting new things at that time. So he was a really great mentor, and that was probably the most interesting business we did.
Did any of those things actually come to life?
No. And that's the thing with entrepreneurship. They don't really all tend to take off. Some of them do, some of them don't. But it's the strategy and putting the thought into the business plan and raising the money. That's a big part of it. I mean, we all have ideas, but when it comes down to it, where are you going to find the cash to make it work? And part of Mark's message to us was, write me a business plan, but then go find some capital. So we had to go and do that as well, and that was, you have to learn. So it was interesting.
Through your experience doing that program, how has that impacted what you're doing now?
It taught me to learn, which is a big thing, and it built my confidence because, like I say, I couldn't pass Math 30 to save my life. And so finally, once I did manage to get that under my belt and I was in this program, I mean, I was on the Dean's Honor Roll almost every semester because I wanted to be there so badly and I worked so hard at it that really it taught me that I could overcome anything just by working hard, and there's no such thing as failure. Like you're not going to hit it out of the park every time, but you will learn something every time you take a try at it or 10 tries at it, and it's good for you.
And then you did an executive MBA at Queen's. What was that experience like?
It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. So it was a 2-year program condensed into 16 months. I did it with a team in Edmonton, and there were teams all across Canada, and we'd meet in Kingston for our residential sessions, and then we did our international traveling together. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, they really teach you they expect that everybody's either running or owning their own business, and you're working full-time, and then you're doing your MBA full-time in a condensed fashion. So they taught me that there's nothing I can't do.
Well, how do you approach kind of work-life balance then in that sense? Like you went through pretty intense experiences educationally, and I'm assuming that running this business is also intense.
Yeah.
How do you address?
I'm addressing it.
Yeah.
I am now.
In the midst of it?
Yeah, it's been tough. Like I've been, my career's kind of moved quite quickly, and I've, been in school part of it, and I don't have a family, and I'm not married, so that part has sort of taken a bit of a back seat. But I think now I'm in a place where I can start to believe the work-life balance, and I'm not. I'll admit I'm not great.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people say, well, balance is the thing that you need to find, but some people find balance in being involved in the one occupation and the one role that they're maximizing their ability to contribute.
Absolutely.
And
if you're really passionate about what you do, you're going to find that it provides you a lot of the balance. I think for students, you're all sitting here in business 201, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're thinking, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Some of you might think you know, some of you might not know, but if you play into your strengths and do what you really like to do, you'll find that the work-life balance, I think, does take care of itself to some degree because you're doing what you like to do. I mean, work is a third of your life. Don't get into a job where you feel like you're battling it up the hill every day. Get into something where you're good at it. I mean, it gives you energy rather than taking it away.
Do you have any other kind of advice for the first-year student that hasn't really thought about supply chain and as a major and something that they can actually spend more of their time studying?
So I think the supply chain is, there's everything we do is connected to the supply chain. There's an element of human resources in everything. There's an element of accounting in everything, but that's a part of it. Supply chain it's huge. It's where Amazon's going. They're buying their own fleet of jets now to deliver. Like, drone deliveries are becoming a big thing. Supply chain is everywhere and it's all around us. And I think if you really want to escalate your careers quickly, the supply chain's where you can do it because it's changing. It's very focused on technology. In the olden days, supply chain was getting it from A to B to C to D. Now it's technology and analytics running it. So there's so many elements to making things connect that if you like complexity and you like moving parts and you like to kind of see things from start to finish, I think the supply chain's a fabulous career. It's turning over. There's a lot of older baby boomers that own businesses in supply chain, especially in Edmonton. They're starting to retire. I think your career trajectory is big. Look at me. I mean, I'm not that old. And my colleagues, I've got a lot of very young colleagues that are, up and coming, and their careers are just getting started. So you look around, there's trucking companies, there's courier companies, there's airlines. It's all around us. And they all need people that know what you know. Because I can tell you that these companies, they need to be refreshed, and now's the time to do it because the economy's not great, so it is good timing to get in.
You talked about having someone with ability to handle complex situations, being able to analyze things. What other things do you look for in people and the people that you hire, other qualities?
I think it's attitude is the biggest one. So any type of task in our business you can train somebody to do. Attitude's the big one. People are willing to learn and they want to take on new challenges and really stretch themselves. I think that's what we look for, and it's people that are excited about it. I mean, you can't make somebody be excited about something, but if you have that, I mean, it opens the business up to new ideas, and I think that's what employers are looking for, and especially more so today than ever before.
So when you get people applying for jobs, and I don't know if it's like the co-op students or what, do they come excited?
Very.
To be honest, I'm going to have a hard time. Like, I can get excited for a thing, I'm going to work for Google or Facebook, like things that you really understand well. But if it's a company you don't fully understand in the industry, I find it hard, for students to generate that excitement. What would excite people?
Based on what I know from my experience in the supply chain, it's an adrenaline-based business. It's not boring. You're not balancing the ledger and
Right.
Accounting's not my thing. I appreciate them because I can't live without them. But no, it's an adrenaline-based business. It's exciting. People need things now. They want you to connect the dots. You're in control of what you're doing. People rely on you, and that's what people love about our business. And it's never the same day twice, and it's not kind of rinse and repeat. It's different, and you have to think outside the box, and that's a great way to spend your day.
Right. I like that description of an adrenaline-based business.
Yeah.
You typically don't think of it that way. And when you were starting to consider this as a career option, what were the other options? Like you said, you worked in Forzani's. Were you thinking a different path, and you kind of had different alternatives?
Yeah, I was thinking more procurement. So, sporting goods being a buyer for Forzani Group, when at that time their head office, well, I think it still is in Calgary. Sport Mart stores, Sport Check stores were all under one roof with all the buyers, and it was all in one space.
Okay.
There was a very open career, like you kind of knew what the next steps were, and I think I could have spent a lot of time, because I was this avid skier, and I'm still very outgoing and athletic, and I think I could have spent my whole career there, but there was always something about the logistics business, from just watching it in Yellowknife and seeing it all around me, that I always had a fondness for. And then once I came back into the business, I knew right away that that's where I wanted to spend my time. So.
Okay. We have a question here from Amy. What would you recommend to a student who has declared supply chain as a major? And how should a student prepare themselves for the transition from student to professional?
Here's what I suggest. I think if you've declared it and you're going to go down that road, summer's coming, go get a job in a warehouse. Go get a job, something in the supply chain, and get a taste of it, if you haven't already. In the supply chain, part of what makes people really good at it is the people who've done it, loading trucks, building pallets, sweeping the floor, watching it go on. That's what I would say you should do right now, because your appreciation for the material in your classes is going to be, more enhanced, I would say. And then as you become, more moving through your career, always understand that the supply chain it's about you, but really it's about frontline people that load planes and buy goods, and always have an appreciation for those around you, because it's really, there's a lot of pieces in the supply chain. So as you become a professional, just understand how it all comes together, because it's that appreciation that builds respect for you and for the people around you as you move through your career.
From Michaela, you mentioned that you supply to Afghanistan and northern Canada. So I was wondering if there's a lot of opportunity to travel within a supply chain career, or is it more locally based work?
It can be both. Typically what we see are people who love to travel, and there's those who like to stay home. And so for those who like to travel, we're always looking for people to go to Iqaluit and Cambridge Bay, or go to Yellowknife and do something. So we have people traveling all the time, and then we have people that don't travel because maybe they have a family, or they're not, that's not what they like to do. So it's you can have it both ways. I think the way travel works in your career and how you want to approach that is very simple. And I don't know, from what I know from working with and for different companies is if you express the interest in traveling and you make yourself available to opportunities, they will come. Because a lot of your coworkers will travel 3 or 4 times and then, it's not for me. I don't like sleeping in weird hotels and I like to be in my own bed at night. And, I went once or twice and I'm good. But if you're that person who likes to travel, make that known and there will always be travel opportunities.
Priscilla's wondering, what kind of position do you recommend to someone who wants to start in the supply chain area? I guess some of the first entry-level type of jobs.
I would suggest that because the supply chain is fairly complex, you have transportation, warehousing, procurement. There's so many levels. I would pick one, and just anything. But just wherever you start, go into an entry-level job if you want to work in a warehouse. I always think warehouse experience is really great for people because it's just kind of the foundation of everything around you. If you want to get into procurement as a buyer or a junior buyer, that's great too because it links you up with the beginning of the supply chain, not the end of it. Work in a trucking company. There's anything really. I would just take a look at all of the elements of the supply chain and pick one and just go there and start it because you might start off in transportation and end up in working for a mining company as part of their logistics team. So that it really spans the gamut of where you can go.
Sometimes these entry-level jobs can be tedious or repetitive in nature, but maybe go in with an attitude, like an open mind and a positive attitude to make the most of it. And maybe so I remember when I was in my finishing grade 12, my first summer job after high school, I was in this factory producing safety belts, harnesses for people that were, scaling buildings and, doing construction work. And the job that they got me to do was taking these plastic tubes and melting the plastic on this hot rod, just kind of burn off some of the plastic. And this was, in the late 90s. And thinking back to that, I wonder if that would pass safety because I was inhaling like melted plastic all day long. And I hated that smell. And so to me, I didn't want to be, negative and down about it. My challenge for myself was, I'm going to try and do this as quickly as possible, just so I didn't have to inhale it. And then I managed, so they said you go through like hundreds of this throughout your 8 hours here. So I would do it like in 3 hours. And then I'd say, I have 5 hours left. What else can I do? So they had to find more work for me in other parts of the factory. So I started doing other stuff, and everything I got asked to do, I'd say, okay, I'm going to try and do this as fast as possible. Show them that I can do it, and then, and I eventually, within 2 weeks, got into their office and started doing like computer-related stuff for them. Right? So just show that you can do things with an open mind, and then who knows where they're going to move you to next.
I think that's the perfect example. I mean, you can see people who don't, if you're in that job and you're taking your first summer job in a warehouse, take on extra things. Be willing to get out there and learn. People take notice of it, and they always want you to take something off their plate, and that's how you move ahead. Really, really stretch yourself. If you're there for 8 hours a day, show that you're willing to put some effort in, and that comes back to you in spades for sure. Yeah.
I have a question from Abraham. Is supply chain management considered a middleman for companies and firms? I'm not sure if you can answer that.
Supply chain management can be, depending on who the companies are and what part you're looking at. So, I mean, yeah, the supply chain can be the middle glue that gets things from where you want them to be to where they came from. And then in other parts of the supply chain, you kind of are it. Like depending on where you are in things. Like look at Amazon, they're a huge part of the supply chain, but they're also the retailer. So it depends on what aspect you're looking at it from. But you can be the middleman, or you can be part of the organization. And some organizations, their supply chain is part of them and they don't outsource it. So you're not the middleman, you're the one who's working with the engineering teams and the construction teams to build things, and you're a very integral part of that. So working for a supply chain as a third party is one thing, but many companies have their own supply chain teams in-house, and those people, they sit at the boardroom table with decision makers and have input into how things develop in their companies, so it can be very different.
Are there anything on the horizon that you think are opportunities in the next 5-10 years in your area?
Supply chain technology is a huge opportunity. People appreciate getting their stuff, and I mean that's the basic nature of it. The real key is going to be how supply chains evolve with technology and how that ties into online purchasing and being able to complete projects cost effectively when you're trying to build something. How I find the supply chain can often lag in cost control in different parts of it. So I think IT is going to be a big driver behind the evolution of the supply chain, and I think that the way people develop the supply chain is going to be really based on analytics going forward.
In terms of the language that we use in the course, things like critical thinking skills, technological skills, ability to analyze, use technology to help that, in terms of setting yourself up for the future of the business and the industry, right? If they've taken courses around analytics and different types of metrics, that might help as well, contribute.
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, those are almost must-haves, I think.
How about other things like presentation skills and that kind of stuff? How important is that?
It's very important. So with one of the first co-op student we ever had from this program, he's still employed with us today, and he's in business development in the supply chain. So he's actually in a sales role, and he calls on the diamond mines and the government, and so his presentation skills have to be there. And it's not what you're learning in the class about the supply chain. Remember that if you're in a supply chain business, you still have to sell it. You still have to be into business development roles. But unless you know something about the supply chain and have the background that you're getting here, you can't necessarily sell it. So presentation skills, communication, they're all very important, because you might find that you're in the office one day and the next day you're out on a sales call with somebody, being the subject matter expert. It doesn't take very long from being the subject matter expert to the person who's leading the presentation. So those types of opportunities are inherent when you get into the working.
And not to kind of make the challenge of choosing a major more complicated for you guys, but you could have thought, well, marketing is the thing I want to do if I want to do sales and I want to do that kind of stuff. But then you realize, after hearing this, maybe it's the supply chain thing, or maybe I should do the marketing, but then target this company as a place to work as a marketing major, or vice versa. Like it can get a little bit confusing, but I think the bottom line was kind of have a passion for what you're wanting to do. And be sincere, authentic, as you call it, and proceed with whatever you end up doing, keeping an open mind, though, that the jobs that you thought you were going to target, or the companies you were going to target, might not necessarily be the ones. It was for Zanny for a while, and then it switched over to something else.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you very much, Heather, for spending the morning with us, and welcome back. Come back to MacEwan anytime.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.